was truth in journalism, where brave men and women gave voice to the voiceless. But then the corporations bought the journalist, poisoning the news that we are fed. With those tainted sources, all we ever ate was a steady diet of status quo. This hijacked narrative hid the truth of mass suffering, injustice, and corruption throughout our land. Status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo. To expose this shift to oligarchy came a band of honest journalists. They left the studio and hit the streets to give the microphone back to the people. From sea to sea, the people were empowered to share their truth. Their voices no longer stifled, reclaimed their power. Join the media revolution now.
Hey there, Jordan Sheridan live on a Friday, December 13th. Friday the 13th. Would you look at that? Nothing bad has happened to me today, so I'm having a good day. Hope you are too. We have quite the show today to end the week, and some more original reporting for you. I did an interview on the evolution of one Pete Buttigieg supporter. So we're going to have that in a little bit. We'll show you some more of Marcus's reporting in the field at a Joe Biden rally, and some corn pops are involved. We have Mayor Pete in an interview with the Washington Post making the case against himself. So quite a lot to do. This is a super chat. Thank you, Rennie, $4 already with that awesome sticker. So thank you for the super chat. Real quick before we get to the top story, you know the drill. We have a huge audience right now. So 430 people watching. We need every single one of you. Please press that like button. Even if you don't like me, fake it till you make it. Press the thumbs up button right under the video. The more people that press that like button, the more people that will see the live stream. If you're not on our text alert system, what are you doing? Text 474747 and enter Coup. That would be COUP. That helps us get around these YouTube notification delays, which there are many delays in notifying you when we're live here. Follow us at Status Coup. We're live there on Periscope right now. Also follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Status Coup, twitch.tv/Status Coup, and join our email list at statuscoup.com. Enter your email there. Another great way for us to build. So I told you a couple weeks ago when my former boss, Cenk Uygur, announced his run for the 25th district in Congress, I wasn't going to cover it because if I don't really feel like I could be objective in something, I'm not going to cover it, you know? Even with covering Biden, even covering Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, even Republicans, you know, obviously I have my opinion, which I don't hide, but I could be objective about it, give them credit when they deserve credit, because of things that have gone on in the past that I don't need to go into. It would just honestly be hard for me to be objective to cover Cenk's campaign. So I said I wasn't going to do it. But now that there's a story involving Bernie Sanders' campaign, I mean, I don't want to ignore it, particularly since, you know, when a presidential candidate retracts an endorsement, it's kind of a big deal, particularly for when it comes to Bernie Sanders. So thank you for the super chat. Rob R, Dow 99, happy Bernie retracted, and I should stay far away. Jordan, my child, how are you? Thank you, Vladimir Putin. Sorry I missed the conference call. Natural Progressive, $3. So if you missed it, it's I think trending right now on Twitter. Cenk came out with this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the endorsements of Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, Nina Turner, and local progressive groups that gave me support. Their stance took real courage in the face of the corporate media and Democratic establishment onslaught. I want to be free. of any influence other than the voters of California's 25th District. I will not be beholden to corporations, lobbyists, or special interest groups, and I will not stand by while those groups attack my political allies. That's why I've decided that I will not be accepting any endorsements. My job is to represent the voters and the voters alone. The only endorsements I'll be accepting going forward is that of the voters of California's 25th District. So that was Cenk. I say this not as for any other reason than just I have a brain. This is not because of any ill will I have towards him, but I mean, if you believe that Cenk on his own volition just asked the most progressive politician in America, the most popular politician in America, to not endorse him, I got a golden bridge to sell you. Obviously, if you don't know, there was a lot of criticism of Cenk. He decided to run for Congress, so it's different if you're hosting a show. You can get criticism, but it's your show, whatever. But if you're running for Congress, everything is open season and fair game. And I'm not going to relitigate it, but when he was younger, I believe 30 or close to 30, Cenk made comments in old blog posts that were severely demeaning of women. So obviously, running for Congress, that's going to come back to bite you. I mean, you don't have to be a political expert who's facing him to dredge that up in commercials, feeding it to the media. That's what's going to happen. So, I assume Cenk knew that entering the race that this was going to happen, and I think it's fair game. These are not comments. I'm not going to rehash them, but you could find them online. They weren't comments he made as like a teenager. He was an adult when he made these comments about women. So it is fair game. Whether you're a progressive, whether you're a conservative, you have to answer for those comments. In recent days, he claimed he was at a period in his life where he was doing a Republican shtick and whatever, he learned better. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true that, he disavows the comments and he was a different person. I can't get in his mind. So I don't, I'm not here to psychoanalyze him. I have my feelings towards him that I'm not going to get into. But I think that politically speaking, I got to be honest with you, I don't think Bernie Sanders should have endorsed him in the first place. I mean, yeah, there's something to be said for standing with your convictions and saying to hell with it. That other campaign, the media was doing pieces on Cenk and his comments about women in the past. Obviously, his political opponents were going after him. But the bottom line is, whether Cenk made these comments in the last year or 5 years or 20 years ago, I mean, Bernie's campaign, and Bernie, you're running for president. You are running, and there has been propaganda out there against you from MSNBC, particularly that you're anti-woman or, the Bernie bros, this kind of thing. And I don't think it was that smart, even if Bernie, and I remember when I worked there, Bernie has a soft spot for Cenk, and I know that they had a good relationship, and I'm not criticizing Bernie. Obviously, the Young Turks gave Bernie a huge platform in 2016 when he was getting blacked out by the media. So I'm not criticizing Bernie for the sentiment of wanting to, I guess, pay the favor back or be loyal. But at the end of the day, you can't be running for president on this message of lifting up everybody. And, Bernie this time around has had done a really good job with hiring a diverse coalition. First Muslim running a presidential campaign, Fez Shakir as his campaign manager, as a very, very diverse staff. But if you're going to endorse someone who, as an adult, it goes beyond crude comments about women. Maybe he's atoned for it. Maybe he doesn't mean it anymore. Maybe he's being genuine, but it is what it is. The comments were made. There were also comments that the media has dredged up that he has made over the last decade on the Young Turks that are not so good. So I'm not the PC police. And even though, take Cenk out of it for a second and just put anyone else in, if you're running for office and you've made really, really disgusting comments about women, whether it was a shtick, whatever it was, I would have not attached myself to that person if I was Bernie's campaign. And like I said, I got a bridge to sell you if you think Cenk just out of the kindness of his heart said, "Oh, I don't want your endorsement, retract it." Obviously, the pressure was getting to. I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but my assumption is Bernie's campaign saw after Bernie endorsed him. This is we can't defend him on the statements he's made in the past, and we don't want any distractions. Bernie has a lot of momentum right now. Bernie is basically right there in Iowa, right there in New Hampshire. This new poll that just came out the other day shows that he is eating in to Biden's firewall in South Carolina, of all places, where Biden was at 27%, Bernie was at 20%. That is the closest margin Bernie has been at in South Carolina to Biden the whole entire campaign. So it's lights out. If Bernie wins Iowa or New Hampshire and then comes in a close second in South Carolina where Biden does not crush him, good night, nurse, to Joe Biden. Good night. The Titanic is averted in that case. The Titanic is averted because if Bernie Sanders wins either of those first two contests and then comes within a fighter's shot in the second contest, that shows, well, his anemic numbers with older African Americans and just black people in general. In 2016, he obviously won the millennial black vote, but obviously lost the older crowd. If it comes close in South Carolina, the argument Joe Biden has is done. The argument that Joe Biden is the only one that can take on Trump, and Joe Biden is the only one that has this multiracial coalition and is dominating the black vote, is done. So honestly, from a political point of view, sure, people who support Cenk, people who support love the Young Turks are going to be mad at Bernie. But I don't, although I don't think he should have endorsed him in the first place, I can't blame him. This is his tweet. Cenk Uygur has been a longtime fighter against corruption. However, our movement is bigger than any one person. I hear my supporters who are frustrated and understand their concerns. Today, Cenk said he's rejecting all endorsements for his campaign, and I retract my endorsement. So, I mean, listen, I love you, Bernie, but I wasn't born yesterday. And this is not because of any feelings I have about Cenk. The truth is, clearly, this is one of those things where somebody's getting fired, but because you don't want to do, you want to soften the blow, you say, we're parting mutually. So clearly, Bernie's campaign, and not just Bernie's campaign, but you also had Ro Khanna, who tweeted out, Cenk asked Bernie, Nina, and me to retract our endorsements. Like Bernie, I do. His statements were wrong and hurtful, which he has acknowledged. Genuine thanks to all who have made their views heard. Let's continue to fight in a broad coalition for progressive values. So it's. I don't think you need to be a rocket science to realize Bernie's campaign signaled to Cenk that they couldn't stand by the retraction, and Cenk then asked these people to unretract or unendorse, whatever. To tell you the truth, I don't find this to be a gleeful moment. I don't find this to be an exciting thing or a good thing. I think the media is going to pounce on it. The New York Times has already written about it, this and that. I haven't watched CNN or MSNBC, but I'm sure they're going to do a field day saying, how could Bernie attach himself to this? It's going to be a twofer because obviously the corporate media wants to go after Cenk too. So that's why I say I don't understand why Bernie's campaign even took the risk of doing this. You could make an argument on either side. You could say, oh, Jordan, he made these comments 20 years ago, yada, yada, yada. Well, if you're running for office, comments you made as an adult are going to come back and be relevant. So you have to defend them. It doesn't matter if you're a Young Turks fan. It doesn't matter if you're a Cenk fan. It doesn't matter if you personally think like, oh, people say stupid things when they're young, yada, yada, yada. You're running for office. So obviously those things are going to be fair game. Do you think, honestly, if the roles were reversed and Cenk's opponent who was a Republican and was for tax cuts for the rich, for deregulation, for fracking, and comments came out when he was 30 saying the things Cenk has reportedly said about women, you think they would go easy on him? or be like, oh no, it was 20 years ago. Let's not bring that in. Come on. No, Ricky, I'm really not reveling, to be honest with you. I don't think this is a good thing for Bernie Sanders. I'm not going to pretend to really care how it affects Cenk's campaign. People know my views, and that's that. I don't talk about Cenk. I think I can't even count on my hands how many times I've even talked about the Young Turks since my exit. I've moved on. But the truth is, I really hope that this is a one-day story and people move on, because I think that at the end of the day, whether this person said it 20 years ago, 5 years ago, it really doesn't matter. The comments are the comments were the comments. He was an adult when he said it, and I don't think Bernie Sanders should have put himself in that situation to be for the distractions. He does not need the distractions less than 2 months before the Iowa caucus when he's within striking distance of winning. He does not need that. So, yeah, well, you're saying people will forget tomorrow. It's not about whether people will forget tomorrow. It's about, will the corporate media stop covering it? Because people might forget, but the corporate media might not. And for those viewers that are still watching CNN, MSNBC, reading the New York Times, Washington Post, it gives more fodder against Bernie Sanders. So, I mean, that's really all I have to say about it. I'm not happy about it. I don't personally care if Cenk wins his race or loses his race. I'm not interested. To me, the main issue is Bernie. So we'll see. Let me read a couple comments. Thank you for the super chat. President's $5. Screw this cowering. Hasn't Trump proven that if you can't stand up to the establishment, you can overcome? Not that I support Trump. Yeah, well, I don't think the answer is let's be like Trump. You don't fight Trump by being like Trump. You have to have some morals and principles. So again, I'm not. I'm not. This really isn't to be gleeful. I didn't even want to cover this. I texted Jen, should I? But it's the number one trending thing on Twitter, and Bernie Sanders retracting an endorsement is a big deal, whoever it is. So I don't know what to tell you. So yeah. What do you think? You are correct, Jordan. You are not being objective. You are correct, Jordan. You are not being objective. Okay. I mean, I don't know what I'm not being objective about. If you run for office, your comments are going to be under scrutiny. So if Bernie was going to stick with that endorsement and not retract it, then Bernie was going to be on the receiving end for the next week to 2 weeks while he's campaigning with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez around the country, while he's preparing for the next debate, which at the moment it's not clear if they're going to participate, because almost every candidate has said they might boycott it because it's being held where a labor union is picketing. I don't think, sometimes in politics you got to make tough choices. I'm not saying sell your principles, but is less than 2 months before the Iowa caucus, when a poll just came out showing you 7 points down in South Carolina, is that the time to have this kind of distraction if you're Bernie Sanders? I don't think. I don't think so at all. Jimmy has at least one to two of his crew also talk, so it's not all Jimmy talk. Yeah, I love Jimmy, but he's got resources that I don't have yet. So if you'd like to support us and fund us, sign up. Become a Status Coup member. We would love to have our own studio, have co-hosts. Jen will be coming up soon to co-host with me for a day or two. So, hey, I would love for it to not just be my voice. And Jen, what are your thoughts in the super chat? Let us know how you feel about this. But I'm just trying to be honest. I'm not... So Jordan is admitting he's not progressive. He just doesn't care. Why not care to get as many progressives in office? Do you really believe Cenk has those same beliefs? I said this a couple weeks ago when Cenk announced his candidacy, that I'm not going to cover it because I just genuinely, bottom line, there's things people are not aware of that I'm not going to go into. I'll leave it at that. So there's things that I am aware of, that I know, that, no, I would not want this person in office. I'll just leave it at that. That's not me saying it because I'm bitter. I've moved on. What happened happened. It's over now. There's people at the Young Turks I know and like, but sometimes you have information that others don't. Jen does as well. So, yeah, this is not about like being progressive or not being progressive. This is about political reality. Bernie Sanders is up against the entire global, because America is the leader of the global world. Bernie Sanders is up against the entire global oligarchy. He cannot afford any self-inflicted wounds. Now is not the time to say, well, screw it, Jordan. It was 20 years ago. Bernie should stand by his things. It's not about whether you like Cenk or don't like Cenk. I'd be saying this about anyone else, even if it wasn't about Cenk. It's about if somebody as an adult made comments that like weren't just offensive, were downright demeaning about the opposite sex, and they decide to run for office, it's obviously going to come into play. That person will have to explain it. The women are the majority of the country. So whether you think it's water under the bridge, whether you think it shouldn't matter anymore, I've made stupid comments in my past, but I've never made those comments. And if I ran for office, I sure as hell know they would come up. Just like I sure as hell know some other things would come up that's in the public record. This is about Bernie. Do you want, when Bernie Sanders has a fighter's chance of winning both the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, do you want a self-inflicted wound? I think that's it. And I really, personally, I would rather this whatever public relations thing that Cenk asked for their retraction and they're just honoring what he asked for. If you want to believe that, fine. I'd rather that than Bernie Sanders at press conferences and this and that, getting asked questions and having to defend why he's endorsing somebody that made certain comments about women. I don't think we need that distraction, and I don't think the MSNBC, you think they're bad against Bernie now? You think they have people on saying Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl, he's anti-women? If you think that was bad, that's child's play. That's child's play compared to what would come. Pop Reality, thanks for the super chat, $5. If you have info that would warrant not supporting Cenk, we should know. He's not as progressive as I like, but he's not an enemy. Unfortunately, Pop Reality, it's not a choice. I can't get into it. Like, I'm not actually allowed to speak about those things. So it's not something that I'm just like above the fray, not getting into. It's something I can't get into. So I hope that makes sense. And Jen would back me up on that. I literally cannot talk about certain things, particularly my exit from the Young Turks. So I don't know what to tell you. I wanted to cover it because I'd be asked about it, and I don't want to ignore it. So I've made my point. You don't have to agree with me, but I think it was a dumb move for Bernie to endorse him. It's not really about whether you like Cenk, you don't like Cenk. I don't hate Cenk as a person. I don't feel how I felt with him. I don't feel how I felt when I joined the Young Turks, but I don't wish him any ill will, and it doesn't matter to me whether he wins or loses his campaign, but I do care if it affects Bernie's campaign. I do care if it affects Bernie's campaign. So that's that. Now, moving on. And I know some of you don't like it and won't agree with me and blah, 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 blah. That's fine. So I interviewed somebody earlier today. If you noticed on Twitter, Pete Buttigieg, or Refund Pete, was trending the other day. Pete Buttigieg, as I showed you yesterday, basically did a... Jen said, call me and put me on speaker. I can't keep my mouth shut. All right. This should be interesting.
Hey.
Jen, you said, call me. I can't keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, I did. So I didn't want to type everything in the chat. I typed some things, but speaking only for myself, people keep saying, well, he said these things 20 years ago. And that's true for certain things that he said. I want to make it very clear that this is not just a recent issue. So speaking only of the things he said 20 years ago or whatever it was, at no point, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, whatever you are, is it okay to say that women are genetically inferior because they don't want to have sex with you? That to me speaks to a person's character on a deeper level that goes way beyond politics. You can say he apologized, whatever, and that's not even the only comment he made. I mean, there are articles from 2 years ago, a year ago, whatever, more articles out today if people want to look it up and research. I'm not going to detail everything that he said, but he said some really disgusting things. And as a woman, I'm not one of those women who gets offended by everything. I'm not one of those like uber feminists who just, whatever. I am a feminist for sure, but I'm not one who gets offended over everything. The things he said infuriate me and offend me to my core. And that does not even get into the things he said more recently, such as ranking women. That was, a year or two ago, defending the ranking of women based on their looks, talking about, like, whether or not men would want blowjobs from certain women. His continued lack of character when it comes to women is disgusting to me. And I think it was a huge mistake for Bernie. And obviously they would vet everyone very thoroughly who they endorse, who Bernie endorses. He has a team to do that. It was shocking to me that Bernie endorsed him in the first place. I think that was a major, major misstep. I was then very shocked to learn that obviously their team, I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but it seems to me that their teams went back and forth on the best way to kind of break the news that Bernie would have to retract this endorsement. And I think from a PR standpoint, the way they did it is the best possible way, because it kind of lessens the blow. It doesn't make it look like Bernie's just fully retracting. It looks like Cenk is like letting him retract and is no longer accepting any endorsements. So from a PR standpoint, I hope it'll all be okay, but it is a blow to Bernie. It makes Bernie look bad. And even people like me who are true progressives, true fans of Bernie's message and his policies are infuriated by the things Cenk has said. And not only that, his money, his company was funded by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who has donated to every candidate, I believe, every major Democratic primary candidate except for Bernie. So that's the type of people that Cenk is surrounding himself with. There's other stuff that I cannot go into and won't go into, but for the people saying, oh, so you'd rather have a centrist. No one is saying that. No one is saying that we or anyone else should choose a centrist over a progressive. What I am saying is that Cenk had to know that this stuff was going to come out, that it could be potentially disqualifying. He's potentially taken the place of other progressive candidates who could have gotten into the race. And I think it's a big old mess. There's no easy answer, but it was a mistake for Bernie to do this. So that's my thoughts. There are real reasons to dislike Cenk. This is not like Jordan, the people saying, oh, Jordan's just bitter, this and that. No, it's not. That's not what it is. Jordan actually, I think, was, I was obviously watching, and I think was very calm and just presented the facts, and people are insinuating certain things that just aren't true. These are the facts. And actually, it's really hard for me to kind of hold back right now. But there are true reasons to not support Cenk. So that has nothing to do with choosing a centrist over a progressive. Obviously, we are true fighters for progressives and the progressive message and cause. So that's all I will say for now. I just had to get my 2 cents in verbally.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. That is, for those of you asking, that was Jen, the co-founder of Status Coup. She's based in Maryland. Some of you were like, oh, why does Jordan do the show by himself? Please, help us with funding. I'd love to have a co-host. We're trying to get to 1,000 by the end of this year. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. And the last thing I'll say on it, honestly, to me, whether you like Cenk or the Young Turks is irrelevant. To me, this is just about Bernie's campaign. I think Cenk has positions that are good on a lot of things. I don't love what the Young Turks has become. It's become a 24/7 Russia, edgier version of MSNBC, in my view, the last few years. Even when I was there, I publicly said enough with the Trump. I mean, it's 24/7. So to me, I mean, that's just the truth. They are not covering things that other people like they used to, that others do not. But to me, I just don't want to see this affect Bernie Sanders negatively. That's the only reason I did this topic. And if Cenk wins, more power to it. I just personally, I'm not invested in whether he wins or whether he loses. I don't think at this point you need the distraction. And that's why I wish Bernie wouldn't have endorsed him. But it is what it is, and time to move on. So, as I was saying, Pete Buttigieg, finally, somebody is investigating Pete Buttigieg. Finally, the fraud that is Pete Buttigieg is starting to be exposed. As I showed you yesterday, had a little perp walk where activists found where he was having his campaign caviar and champagne fundraisers in New York, particularly on Park Avenue. So they found where he was. There was a bit of a perp walk on his way out. And this week, there was a Refund Pete hashtag where people that bought this nonsense, that this is somehow a new generation of leadership, that this was a progressive, were asking for their money back. And credit to Pete's campaign, in the beginning, they were given the money back, but then they slowly realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of people asking for refunds here. This is going to make us look bad, because it's all about inflating the numbers for the end of the year financial report, because the end of the year is coming, which means the fourth quarter ends, and all the campaigns are, are battling each other for who's going to raise the most money in the fourth quarter. So I caught up with the person who actually started the hashtag Refund Pete. We interviewed a little earlier. His name's Connor. Definitely is a little more open to, say, Elizabeth Warren than I am. He's also open to Bernie, but he clearly has seen Jesus when it comes to Pete Buttigieg. So let's take a listen to my interview with Connor, who started, at one point, it was trending #1 on Twitter, the Refund Pete hashtag. Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Connor Bronsden. You kind of started a little Twitter trend yesterday.
Yeah.
Refund Pete was trending, and I saw a lot of people who I guess originally kind of were donating and supporting Mayor Pete based on different, more progressive promises he was making.
Yes.
Legitimate, like actually asking for a refund. Can you kind of talk
about for all, free college, campaign finance reform? There were quite a few reasons for sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. In the beginning, when he first started to run, what did you know about him, and what attracted to you at first?
Yeah. Yes. So honestly, this is a bit of a case of, maybe I should have done better research. I think that's something that you can say to some folks. But at the same time, it's hard with these national candidates when they're coming out. They're portraying themselves one way. And, Pete, he'd said, I'm for Medicare for all. I believe in free college. He in 2010, when he ran for state treasurer, he had refused to accept donations from big banks. So there's a lot of stuff to like about him. And frankly, he's a charming guy. He's got some really strong energy about him. He's young. He's someone who kind of portrayed himself when he came to the campaign as this progressive. And, don't get me wrong, there are some folks who saw through that, but there are plenty of us who saw his, say, for example, in my case, March 10th town hall on CNN and said, this guy deserves to be on the debate stage. And so I know for me, I saw an ad from his saying, I need to get 65,000 donors to get on the debate stage. And, I donated $3, which is, pocket change, as he says. But my thought process was, this guy's smart. He's young. I want to see this guy in the debates. And since then, he's made this clear rightward shift that's been very calculated based around, whatever he's poll testing or trying to be the heir apparent to Biden, whatever his rationale. And I think there's a lot of us out there who are very frustrated by that. So I'm excited that folks are using the hashtag and reaching out to the campaign to get their refunds.
So I want to ask you, not as a criticism, I'm just kind of curious.
Sure.
Because to me, I look at him, and maybe it's just because I'm so used to politicians being full of it, and I say, what is his qualification? What has he done in South Bend, Indiana? When you were aside from his presentation, did you ever see national media stories in the beginning about like what he did as a mayor that made you think, oh, he could, if he did that there, maybe he could do that on a grander scale?
So there wasn't a ton about it, and I guess I should explain a bit about my donor rationale. I've donated now to, I think, 4 or 5 different candidates in the primary this year. I've donated to Bernie Sanders. I've donated to Elizabeth Warren, donated to Jay Inslee. I think I've donated to Castro as well. And then obviously I had the donation to Pete. So for me, I was early on very much of the mind that I wanted to get these different voices out there. And so it was less about saying, this is someone who I know is perfect on all the issues. More so saying this is someone who is a progressive, who is young, who's going to bring a voice to the stage that isn't otherwise represented. And as much as I love say Warren and Bernie, they're in their 70s, right? So having someone who's from a younger generation and is bringing that idealism was appealing to me. It reminded me of President Obama, and I think it's absolutely a bit of a critique to say you need to do more research on that, and that's fair. But I do also want to point out that I think there were a lot of us who gave, and in fact I know several Bernie supporters who gave $1 or $2 just saying oh, this guy seems like he deserves to be on the stage. We were seeing. I think the one news story I saw about him before his town hall that I distinctly remember was the story about his essay when he was a high schooler praising Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent, I think the way the national media and how his campaign sold him to start with was very focused around, oh, this guy's a progressive. And as you aptly point out, there are major concerns about how people are being labeled there, because unless we actually do the research and follow up, we're sometimes going to be fooled by stuff like that. And that's why I'm really thankful that, folks like yourself are out here and doing this independent media work, because we need people investigating. We need people to do this follow up. And so I'll freely admit, I was fooled. I saw someone who was charismatic and had these qualities and frankly is very smart. And I said, this is someone I want on a debate stage. And given time and retrospect, I think it's pretty clear that he's not the values I want represented in this party. And sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
I think it's interesting, actually, because as somebody who's worked in corporate media, I think Pete Buttigieg is a case study on kind of who journalists like to hang out with and who they respect and see as, this new shiny thing. And then they kind of push that forward. I mean, you look at Trump.
Young mayor, Rhodes Scholar, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. You look at Trump. He got, God knows, billions in free advertising. Mm-hmm. Pete hasn't gotten billions, but he's certainly got tens of millions in free advertising, where it takes just a couple DMs on Twitter for me to find out what he's done in South Bend. But you haven't really seen that it reflected in the national media. Here and there, some reporting on his tense relationship with the black community. Mm-hmm. But for you, what was that light bulb moment like, whoa, I've been sold a bill of goods here?
Honestly, it's not something where I've been planning to vote for Pete. I made that small donation in March, and since then there's been a trickle of stuff. His relations with the African American community in South Bend, obviously a major concern. The treatment of the police chief when he first came on board. His reversals on Medicare for all and free college, obviously major concerns. And then campaign finance, the way he's acted around that, the way he's gone after folks on the left for these very powerful and important proposals. There's a lot of concerns that have been percolating. And, honestly, what prompted me to tweet out Refund Pete was I saw someone else on Twitter say, hey, I think I'm going to ask for a refund. So I did the same thing. And someone else replied and said, can you do that? And it made me realize that most people don't know that campaigns generally will refund your contribution. It's not a legal requirement, except for in very certain circumstances. But even more than 10 days after the fact, they'll usually make a refund because it's frankly bad press for them. Mm-hmm. Though I have heard in this case that there are multiple users reporting that Pete is now refusing to issue refunds because they've had so many requests.
Right, and I've seen that. He doesn't want with the final quarter of 2019 almost done.
Doesn't want to look bad.
Yeah, doesn't want to look bad. And what's interesting, you live in Seattle, you said, so obviously Seattle is a perfect case study in gentrification. And I've been there in the last few months, so very much a tale of two cities. But to people like Pete and kind of that meritocracy, cocktail crowd, Rhodes Scholar, Seattle is amazing. I mean, look what Amazon is doing and technology and, fueling the world's creative class. Thomas Frank wrote about this in Listen Liberal. These buzzwords like creative class, this and that. Have you heard anything other than charismatic? Any meat on the bone as far as what Pete Buttigieg would do to close the income gap per se? Actually get sustainable, productivity chart where productivity is skyrocketing, wages flat. What have you heard?
Substantive, and I think that's something you see through the hashtag, which is everyone saying, look, I maybe donated back in March or April when it was a feel good story, and I wanted to help this young guy who's making waves to join the debate stage. But everyone who's paid attention since then has kind of realized, oh, this guy is not reflecting the values that I thought he was going to be. And so for me, living in Seattle, you're right, and pardon my dog there in the background. It's a great point that we have this huge gentrification problem. Amazon has done so much to grow the local economy here, but by doing that, they've failed to account for their own externalities. We have massive traffic issues. We have massive gentrification and housing concerns. And a lot of that's due to all this growth we're experiencing. I'm not going to say there aren't some benefits around people creating interesting startups and things Amazon has done, but the downsides are massive, and they are severely damaging our climate, our city, and our country, and they need to be accounted for. There's no way that folks like Jeff Bezos should be paying $0 in taxes. But more specifically at Pete, no, I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point that Pete is answering to his corporate donors. He used to say that he was for Medicare for all, and then suddenly he gets a bunch of money from healthcare groups. And he's certainly not saying that anymore. He's running ads against healthcare, healthcare for all and free college in Iowa. It's horrible, frankly. And
by the way, when you were first attracted to him, you didn't know that he was consulting for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
No,
nobody did.
God, no. Yeah. And it's stuff like that where it's just and I understand that in certain cases everyone has to have a job, but you don't need to get to run for president if you're doing that work. If you are, making people lose their livelihoods, if you are engaging in disaster capitalism in Afghanistan. That's what a primary is for us to call people accountable.
And typically Harvard and Oxford and Rhodes Scholar graduates they have the pick of the litter as far as jobs, so he chose that job in particular. Last question. In the beginning, you were obviously open to a lot of different candidates. So now, we're very close to Iowa. Who are you thinking now? It seems like between Bernie and Warren.
So for me, my top two are definitely Bernie and Warren are my top two. I really like Castro as well. I think he's got a ton of energy, and I think my ideal ticket's probably either Bernie Castro or Warren Castro. But at this point, I don't see Castro having a chance to win the primary.
Yeah, and look into Castro too. A lot of interesting sell-offs to Wall Street when he was HUD secretary. Well,
that's totally fair, and that's why I think it's more of a VP pick and opening up Texas. I think that's more my thought process on it, is that if we can put Texas in play, that's a huge thing for Electoral College.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you for doing this, and also it shows. That was trending, even though the corporate media. The New York Times did a piece on it, but I thought it was very tame. The New York Times did a piece on the fact that was trending, Refund Pete. But I also find it interesting, like you said, they were honoring it and refunding, but then when it was
suddenly no.
Oh, wow. Yeah. This is going to really screw up our numbers. Then they couldn't do it anymore. So it just shows you it's a lot of optics, the Pete Buttigieg campaign.
And I think regardless of your candidate, it's important to hold folks accountable on this primary to what they've said and what they're setting out to do. So thanks for having me on, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Connor. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you. So that was Connor, and I could appreciate people like him who, although I don't agree with him, obviously his mind was, oh, Bernie's a little too old. I don't agree with that, but at least, and we're all human, so some people are a little bit more susceptible to false advertising because that's what he was getting. But at least, he has enough of a BS detector to see when he's being sold a bill of goods, and that's what Pete Buttigieg is. He is a bill of goods. I did an interview yesterday. It's up on the channel now if you missed it, with a South Bend resident. It literally took me 5 minutes to realize how little this guy has done in South Bend, Indiana, other than treat black people like crap, other than gentrify the city for developers and wealthy people, and just be a dime a dozen gentrifier. Yet the media has propped this man up to a degree that's insane. Just look at, here's one example. This is Robert Costa of the Washington Post today with Mayor Pete. Listen to this.
We're going to point that out.
But you would have to.
But I am certain that I want absolutely nothing to do with them. But with me as the nominee, this president's going to have to confront, first of all, somebody who actually comes from and lives in the kinds of communities he pretends to speak for, right? Look, Middle America is mostly flyover country to him. It's what he sees out the window of his helicopter on his way to a golf course with his name on it. I actually live in an industrial Midwestern community where my friends and neighbors and the folks I went to school with are seeing the consequences of a president who talks a big game about caring for American workers and the working class, and meanwhile continues to act in ways that only benefit the wealthiest and the corporations. We're going to point that out. I live a
But all you do is set policy as mayor that helps the wealthy and the corporations. So is this the contrast you want? Do you not think the $200 million the RNC has, thank you, Andy P, for the super chat. Do you not think the $200 million that the RNC has, that all of the neocons and the bankers and all these people that are going to give the Republicans don't have opposition research of what Pete Buttigieg has done in South Bend? He's a dime a dozen gentrifier. He has sold out South Bend to developers. I just got an email before I went live on something I need to investigate about how his administration basically said they were bulldozing 1,000 houses in 100 days. Well, in reality, he bought them up to sell them to Wall Street, which we'll have an investigation on. So this guy, he basically paints himself as the next generation because he's 37 and paints himself as understanding middle America when all you got to do is go to South Bend, which I plan on doing in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll find out very quickly he has barely been in South Bend. He's been running for DNC chair for the last, and now president for the last 2 to 3 years. He's not of South Bend. He's not out with working people in the streets. Working people can barely get an audience with the mayor. It's unbelievable. Another doozy from this mayor, which you can't even make this up. The fraudulence of this man. Take a look.
We haven't.
Corporatist calling you Pete Romney. What's your response to those protesters and that critique?
Well, it is a little strange because I think that I broadly share the same values and goals as a lot of these folks. It's a little hard to have a conversation with them, so I don't know for sure. But I'm calling for greater accountability for corporations, calling for higher taxes on corporations and the wealthy, calling for a living wage, and calling for greater union membership. And not just because it's the position of my party, it's because my city was destroyed by economic failures and greed that had left their mark before I was even born and that we have spent my lifetime clawing our way out of. So I'm under no illusions about all of the ways in which our current economic system has failed us. Now, part of our democratic process in all of its messy beauty is that individuals.
So I happen to know some of the protesters that were out protesting Wall Street Pete as he was doing swigging champagne and caviar on Park Avenue. Trust me, Pete, you got nothing in common with these folks. First of all, you are trying to keep a for-profit health insurance industry. Don't let this, it's a public option, Medicare for everybody who wants it, blah, 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 blah. A public option does not do anything to set price controls. A public option is something you have to buy in. It's just a premium with another name. It is a premium where you need to buy in to have access to Medicare. Well, not everybody could afford that premium. Not everyone is eligible for a public option, or as Pete calls it, Medicare for all who want it. And it's a lie because it's not Medicare. It's not. Medicare is a government, the providers are private, but the government is the distributor of the health care. What he is describing is not Medicare, because Medicare is the monopoly for seniors that age. What he is describing is basically just creating a different healthcare system, slap the Medicare name on it, and make you buy into it, which not all of the population would have the choice to buy into it because there's requirements and certain people wouldn't be able to buy into it. So he is lying. He's also calling for, he's not calling for an end of these wars. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. When he says, my city was destroyed, you've been gentrifying South Bend. Not just me, but other independent media outlets have interviewed people from South Bend. All you've done is sell it off to developers. No different than the mayor of Detroit has done, and the mayor of Cleveland has done, and New York City and Philadelphia. I give you Michael Bloomberg. So it's amazing to me. And of course, that Washington Post stooge didn't challenge him on any of this, because that Washington Post stooge isn't out with the people seeing what's really going on. And he's paid not to show that. He's paid not to care. And by the way, I was on the campaign trail in 2016 with Bob Costa. Ugh, God, I could do a whole hour on him. I actually, I kid you not, I was in the seat behind him on a campaign bus, and through the crack, through the seat crack, I saw him typing a story, and I could read. And I saw him consistently backspacing and deleting sentences that were somewhat complimentary to Bernie Sanders, and then changing the sentences. I saw it up close with my own eyes. I write about it in Corporate Con Job, by the way, my book, which I'm still actively working on. So it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that this guy is even eligible to run for president. I think it's very questionable if he is has the qualifications to run for governor of his state. He's done nothing in South Bend other than make downtown beautiful and leave the rest of the city to rot. I know you know that story because almost 900 of you many of you live in these types of gentrified cities. But the media in this country is literally a super PAC for the corporate establishment. They are propping up these empty privilege vessels. That's all they're doing. I digress. So, moving on. If you missed it, Marcus has been in the field the last few days. He has covered a Joe Biden rally where literally at one rally he found a Joe Biden supporter who said he wants to have a beer with George W. Bush, another Joe Biden supporter who wrongly says she loves Bernie but then attacked Bernie for not campaigning for Hillary, when Marcus corrected her that Bernie did more campaigning for Hillary than Hillary did for Obama. The person literally said, "Oh, I didn't hear that in the media." And now I want to play for you an interview. It's not just the older folk, Not that all older folk are misguided. There's plenty of older progressives that are totally with it. But unfortunately, the majority of the older folk are buying the BS that the corporate Democratic establishment and their super PAC that is MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post are selling them. So, unfortunately, there's some young people who also need a little love tap, shall I say. Let's take a look at Marcus's reporting with these. I don't even know how you would describe these kitties.
Still here at the Biden event, and I'm here with some folks that had an interesting incident before things started. You guys brought boxes of corn pops.
Yes, we did. So before the event, we actually stopped and at the grocery store picked up a few boxes of corn pops, decorated them with, yes,
Got some in the car.
and decorated them with a bunch of Biden stickers. But unfortunately, before the event started, they were actually taken away from us. They didn't exactly seem to appreciate the fact that we brought corn pops with us.
I mean, that's just. But corn pop's a real person, you know? It's confirmed.
It wasn't intended to be offensive because it's more really to go with a lot of the gaffes that he makes. Those gaffes that he makes are really like what makes him a more genuine person. He has these little anecdotes that he goes along with, and I thought it would be fun to really like kind of spoof that and go along with it, because if you have something like that, that's something that's marketable to younger voters too. So
Yes.
I don't understand what the problem was with it.
Corn pops have become such an image to us in our school. We are in a government class, and our teacher refers to it all the time, and so it's really become a symbol of the hope that Biden could give us. But they decided to take them away, so I'm a little disappointed.
We're just trying to have fun. Just trying to have fun, show our support. Apparently that's not.
So, what is it about Biden? Like, you guys are younger, and Biden's support, like, skews really old. Most millennials is, like, Sanders people, Warren folks, and you guys are, now y'all aren't even millennials, are you? You guys are Gen Zers, right?
I'm not solidly for Biden. I just, I'm not as opposed to him as some other people are. I think that a lot of people hammer him on the gaffes, and I think there definitely are things that I have issues with for him on policy, but I don't think that we should disqualify someone just based on gaffes that they make, because if anything, it just shows that everybody is human and everybody makes mistakes. And I think that when it comes to real, like, foreign policy decisions, is probably his strong suit, and I stand with him on that.
And I am interested to see exactly how these signs will be delivered. I got to speak with him a little bit earlier, and he definitely seemed to be really nice. So I'm interested to see how he will take signing these boxes of corn pops now. And I'm hoping that they see it as the same image we do as him himself. And it makes him, like Mason said, it really makes him seem like a real person, like one of us, not some crazy politician on the stage.
Yeah, I agree with basically everything she said. I think that
The argument has been made and pushed in the media hardcore that Joe Biden's the guy, he's the one to beat Trump. And the reason he's the one to beat Trump is because Trump is a racist and Trump is corrupt. And because of those things, Trump isn't fit to be president. However, folks that know Joe Biden's history have been like, well, look at the crime bill. You know what I mean? Joe Biden himself has a history of systemic racism. And then they also say, look at what happened in Ukraine. There are general questions. There are genuine questions there. So you're just putting Trump light up against Trump, and then you're going to be surprised when you lose.
I think that generally the way that the media has operated, I think that they've sort of come out of the gates and tried to crown a winner really early on. Like pretty much from the second he got into the race, people were talking about him being a front runner. But I have big issues with the way that that's structured, and I think that it should be more so the people deciding, and the media should report on who the people are interested in instead of trying to pick a winner.
How old are you?
I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm on an empty stomach. I couldn't take it anymore. Kudos to Marcus. Kudos to Marcus, because I don't think I would have handled that so hot. First of all, let's just call it what it is. And I've been saying this, frankly, earlier than anyone's been saying it, because we got to keep it real. These are not gaffes. Okay, Joe Biden is not making gaffes. Joe Biden is cognitively not well. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to diagnose the man, but something's not clicking. This old record is on tape delay. Joe Biden is cognitively declining, and I think it is a gigantic liability to have him on a debate stage with Donald Trump, who, as despicable as Donald Trump is, he can construct sentences in full. He's not yet forgetting where he is, publicly at least. So I think this is just a disaster, and the fact that these kids can't see that, when somebody's consistently stumbling through his words, that's not a gaffe, he's declining. And by the way, if you don't know, you guys are funding us to be in the field. I'm going to New Hampshire this week. So definitely, we want to grow our membership. It's as cheap as $5 to $10 a month. It makes a huge difference. We are grassroots funded. We have 0 corporate sponsors. We have 0 fat cat bankers, oil execs, pharma, real estate, Silicon Valley. Nada. We're growing through you. So if you got $5 to $10 a month this Christmas season, spend it on independent journalism. And for those of you that don't know, Jen and I have been talking about it for a while. The update is the major story we've been working on, this investigative piece. It's currently in its second edit. And the outlet that we're working on it for is very happy with this version. And we will be moving forward with it and hopefully publishing it by the end of this year. So I know we've been teasing it for a while. Just hang on a little bit longer. I got some on-the-record comments yesterday that make this story, boo! Jen could attest to that. But we definitely hope you'll sign up as a member. We listen to you. We are indebted to you. And I'm looking forward to getting back in the field this week now that we have a cameraman in hand. So what's amazing to me, besides the fact that they don't understand what cognitive decline is as compared to like cute gaffes, is this whole it will make him attractive to the young. Like the guy in the middle reminded me of like a grandpa at 16. God bless him, nice guy. There's also a certain level of white privilege there, which all white people have, whether conscious or not conscious, when he just kind of dismissed the crime bill. It's yeah, well, that was bad, but I'm sure they live in a decent area in New Hampshire and have never been racially profiled and this and that. But to me, those people, because I've met people like them that are younger that for some reason buy this and buy Biden, to me, those are kids that probably have parents feeding them a lot of this middle-class Joe and he's just lovable, and probably aren't that involved with activism in the trenches in their community. I'm not knocking them. I'm sure they're nice people. But for them to be to have that level of cognitive dissonance would spell to me they're not involved with progressive activism. They probably come from a quasi-privileged background. And, the girl, God bless her, was very focused on the corn pops getting delivered. So, great work by Marcus. He's actually going to be going to cover Bernie with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez next week on the campaign trail in California. So, he's going everywhere. He was in New Hampshire. Now he's going to cover Bernie and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Vegas and California. So, we are putting people out there in the field, I think more than any other outlet. We are trying to cover this campaign. We are trying to give the microphone back to the people, which is our MO. But we just could really use you guys. The more people, the merrier. For some people, even $5 to $10 a month is not doable. So for those people, we get it. If you can't do it, that's fine. Check us out. We're live Monday through Friday. 5 o'clock Eastern time, also on Sundays, noon Eastern time. But if you do have $5 to $10 a month, I think it's best spent on funding actual independent journalism. We don't talk the talk, we walk the walk. As you know, we've been all over the place. We have been all over the place. So, moving on to the last story. the last story of the day. Oh, and I didn't tell you one more time. Oh, we're trying to get to 1,000 by the end of this year. Might be a tough climb, but we're working on it. So definitely sign up today if you can. Last story. It looks like if the debate is not moved, you could have a real boycott. It looks like every candidate, I believe, one hasn't, has said that they will boycott the next debate, which is on the 19th, so next week, if it's not moved, because it's currently being held in a location where there is a labor union picketing, and the candidates do not want to cross the picket line. I'm not surprised. I don't think Joe Biden means it. I don't think Elizabeth Warren means it, but they really couldn't, they couldn't exactly done. Thank you for the $20, by the way. Did I miss that super chat? Archie Arquad, keep up the fight. Thank you, Archie, for the $20. It's not a sustainable position to just let Bernie boycott it and look like the working class hero. So they're all boycotting it. I think that the DNC will be forced to move it because the DNC doesn't want to look, even though they don't care about labor, they optically need to pretend that they care about labor and unions. So to me, it will get moved. So that's not the issue. They're going to debate. It'll get moved. But we have to look at this next debate. At the moment, I believe there are 7 candidates that have qualified. Jen, check me on that. So I think this is the opportunity for Bernie to pounce. Many of you don't like it when I say, but he's kind of an odds and evens guy. One debate, he brings the fire. The next debate, he doesn't, and he holds back. Well, the last debate, he held back. He did not bring the fire. So I'm hoping this debate, he comes out like the dragon from Game of Thrones. I think now that it's down to, I wouldn't say 7 candidates is exactly manageable, but a little better than 12 in one debate. I think Bernie Sanders needs to aggressively go after Joe Biden. I think Bernie Sanders needs to, instead of, my friend Joe here and pontificating and blah, 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 he needs to breathe fire. He also, frankly, he needs to bring up the crime bill. He needs to put a dent in Joe Biden's African American support. Older African Americans are going to vote for Joe Biden, but he needs to pick off, even if it's 1% to 2% of those older African Americans. It makes a big difference. And a lot of those older African Americans, they might know that he voted for the crime bill, but don't know in depth those things. There was a story that just came out that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, in addition to getting $50,000 to do nothing on a Ukrainian oil company, had possession charges that quietly went under the rug while his father was fighting for the crime bill to jail black kids. I think Bernie Sanders needs to bring that stuff up. And I know it's not within his MO, but at the end of the day, you're in a street fight for the presidency of the United States, Bernie. And Biden, thanks to his allies in the media, has kept up. He has kept up the top spot in national polls, as well as he's at least competitive enough in Iowa and New Hampshire that I don't think he's going to be embarrassed at this point. But why I think it's so important for him to go against Biden, I don't think Bernie needs to worry about Pete, to be honest. I think other people will attack Pete. Why he needs to go after Biden is because Biden is the candidate with the most attainable voters to switch over to Bernie. A lot of the media has falsely said, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie are so close. No, that's just not true. As Elizabeth Warren has went down, her voters have been going to Pete because her voters are not working class progressives. Her voters are uber educated, professional class, kind of limousine liberals. Those are her voters. Obviously, she has significant support among women too, but her core voter is not working class and it's not multiracial either. Biden has a lot of voters, has a lot of voters making $50,000 or less and with only high school degrees. Thank you, Chris, for the $10 of the super chat. Those are the attainable voters for Bernie. So Bernie, he's brought up several times Joe Biden's vote on the Iraq war. Terrible. not diminishing that. It's time to really go in depth on his votes on NAFTA. Really go in depth on his vote to repeal Glass-Steagall, which also is in large part responsible for all of these Walking Dead-like communities that had their an episode of The Walking Dead who had their homes foreclosed on because the merger of investment and commercial banks. He is responsible for the bankruptcy bill. He is responsible for the predatory lending towards African Americans through that Glass-Steagall repeal. It allowed for African Americans to be disproportionately harmed during the 2008 financial crash. I have not heard any of this said by Bernie Sanders in the campaign trail. Bernie, if you want a friend, get a dog. Joe Biden is not your friend. He's not. I don't think Bernie needs to concern himself as much about Warren. I don't think Bernie needs to concern himself as much about Pete. They will duke it out. He needs to go after Biden. Not once, not twice, all debate. He should pretend that he's just debating Biden. Because to me, there is a lot of Biden supporters, and the polls show it, that are not 100% sold on Joe Biden. I also think, frankly, Joe Biden has not really had to defend himself on any of those things. If you see when Joe Biden is attacked, he can't defend himself because A, the facts are the facts, but B, I'm just being honest, he's not cognitively well. If you're cognitively declining, which he is, you're just not sharp. So if somebody who is cognitively sharp, like Bernie Sanders, comes after you on A, B, and C, he might be sharp on the first answer, but if you keep coming at him by the third, he might be stumbling like a piñata. Do piñatas stumble? I don't know. So the point is, I've been saying this since 2016. Bernie Sanders needs to stop with the niceties. He needs to stop, oh, my friend here. If you want to maintain your friends and have ginger ale with Joe in your later years on your porch, then you're not going to win the presidency. Rafael Rodriguez, $5 in the super chat. Here's the deal. The fact is, you have to play the record. Look, that's what I do. My time is up. So the bottom line is, Glass-Steagall repeal, NAFTA, TPP, which he was pushing Hillary Clinton to be for, right? Bankruptcy bill, deregulating derivatives. I could go on. Patriot Act. Not just voting for the Iraq War, as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee pushing the Iraq War. 6 months after the Iraq War, doubling down on the Iraq War. These are all things in the public record that he's not bringing up. Doing fundraisers with companies and executives that are union bust. In the past, saying Paul Ryan's right about Medicare and cutting Social Security. He knows all this information. You need to not only cast doubt in a sizable amount of the voters, because the media is not going to bring these things up. Particularly CNN, I think, is hosting the next. PBS is not bringing this stuff up. Jordan should email the campaign. Nah, I'm a journalist. I'm not going to work with the campaign on their talking points. But if they're watching, free advice. Alex, $9.99. What do you think of Bernie's chances of winning are? And do you think South Carolina could be a crumbling wall for Joe? I think if the Iowa caucus were held today, it's a coin toss between Bernie and Buttigieg. I think that Biden is not going to win Iowa. His campaign knows he's not going to win Iowa. I think Warren has really slid in Iowa. I also think it was a little overblown how strong her campaign infrastructure was in Iowa. I think it's between Bernie and Buttigieg in Iowa. I think the wild card is honestly what I've been talking about for a while. Bernie has, there's a hidden Bernie Sanders vote that does not show up in polls because he is trying to expand the electorate by bringing out first-time voters, young voters, which those people aren't called by pollsters. So I think it's up in the air right now between those two, but I think he could win Iowa. New Hampshire, I think he could win also. South Carolina, I don't think he's going to win, but I think he could come in a strong second. I think he will win Nevada. And if the California primary were held today, I believe California would go to Bernie. So to me, the most important state for Bernie, honestly, is Iowa. If Bernie Sanders wins Iowa, forget it. Forget it. If Bernie Sanders wins Iowa, I mean, they're going to throw Jeremy Corbyn level crap at him, worse than we've already seen, talking about the media. But if he wins Iowa, New Hampshire is Bernie's. And then I think he would come in a strong second. I think Biden would keep South Carolina because there's enough older African Americans that would be scared of the term socialist, and they, for whatever reason, are buying what Biden's nonsense. But I think Bernie could win Iowa. But to me, it's why I don't want him to go after Pete is let other people go after Pete. Biden is the one with the most pick-upable voters. So if Bernie goes after Biden, and even if he could get 2% or 1% of Biden voters over to him for the Iowa caucus, that could be the difference for Bernie to win. So I also think Iowa, a lot of Iowa, let's not forget, will depend on monitoring the corporate media. They called the race in Iowa for Hillary Clinton when Bernie was losing by less than 0.1%. So the corporate media do not think that they won't try to screw him. Do not think if Pete is up by 0.1%, they won't just call it. And Bernie's campaign, I am sure, is prepared for that. So, that's it for today. Loved the large audience. Hope to see you back here. What's Sunday? I think I'll be live Sunday at noon Eastern. Monday, obviously, 5 o'clock Eastern. Folks, I'm getting in the field this week. So definitely, if you want more in-the-field reporting, if you want to support in-the-field journalism that counters the corporate propaganda on the campaign trail, if you want us to actually challenge Buttigieg voters, challenge Biden voters, challenge Warren voters, dare I say challenge the candidates if I am lucky enough to get in front of them, help us do it. It's not cheap. Flights are not cheap. Rent-a-cars are not cheap. Hotels are not cheap. Food is not cheap. We're not going having margaritas on the beach. We're going to report for you. We don't want this election to be stolen by the propagandists in the corporate media. Join us. Statuscoup.com/join for as low as $5 a month. We have other plans, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $179 annually. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you on Sunday. Peace.